sleep has probably a bigger impact on rates of muscle protein synthesis than some of all these like nuances around protein stuff. So if you are really depriving yourself of sleep, or you're not depriving yourself, but through the hormonal changes, it's hard for you to get to sleep or stay asleep, et cetera, then it's going to play out not just like in your mood and fatigue and things like that the next day. It's actually going to have a pretty big impact on overall muscle protein synthesis. And thus, we didn't get into it, but on your metabolism. So I think really trying to figure out that sleep thing is a big deal. That said, how do you get better sleep? Well, through exercise, you get better sleep. Through good nutrition, you get better sleep. It's like all these things kind of play together.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have Angelo Keely on the show today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're going to have a deep dive into the world of amino acids, and we're going to cover a lot of ground here. I have so many questions, but I think the best place to get started is what is an amino acid and what does it do?
And in order to make the conversation interesting and accessible, I'll just start with an even more common thing, which is protein, because we've all heard about protein a lot. So, and amino acids are the things that make proteins, the little building blocks of protein. So, what is a protein and why is it important? Many of us, if we've been interested in nutrition, we've heard about micronutrients, we've heard about macronutrients. And micronutrients are micro meaning very small, right? So we're talking about vitamins and minerals, and macronutrients are carbohydrates, fat, and protein, the big nutrients. The thing is that carbohydrates and fat are actually quite different from protein. So the primary reason why we eat carbohydrates and fat is for energy. Fat does some other things, helps build cells, et cetera. But the primary reason why we eat these things is we actually convert them into an energy inside our body that allows us to beat our hearts, breathe, lets our brains work, exercise, just walk, all the things that we do, we actually need energy. Whereas protein is actually the building blocks of our body. You can use it as an energy, like you can actually convert it into something that's like a sugar via gluconeogenesis. I won't throw out too many big annoying words like that, but like you can convert it into something like a carbohydrate into a sugar, but that's not really its primary role in our body. It's actually help us rebuild our bodies. And an analogy I like to use is that of a house. So when you think about your house, you need energy to just run it. Like if you want to run your dishwasher and your laundry machine and turn on the lights and watch TV, and if you have a furnace, well, all of these things require energy. And so how do you get energy to run them? Well, maybe you buy natural gas or you buy electricity from the grid. You could have solar panels. If you're off the grid or you're in a storm, maybe you have a generator and you're burning gasoline. These are all different ways that you bring energy into your house to then run all of these devices. That's what carbohydrates and fat primarily are. On the other hand, your house is also built of stuff, right? It's built of wood and bricks and metal and flooring, ceramic tile, all these different materials that go into like actually building your house. That is what protein actually is. So many people don't understand this, but our bodies are actually made up of protein. Our vital organs, so it's like our heart, our kidneys, our liver, our spleen, our skin, our lean muscle, like half of our bones is made up of proteins, and even things that don't seem so physical, things like enzymes and hormones are made up of proteins. So these are all physical things in our body that are actually made up of this material called proteins. And the way that proteins work in nature and in our bodies is that they don't last forever. So in a way similar to your house, that like if you walk over the same tile over and over and over again, it might start to crack, or the carpet might start to come undone. Or if you open and close a cabinet door, the hinge might start to break. Well, our bodies are actually the same. And constantly our skin tissue, our heart tissue, enzymes, hormones, all of these, the proteins in them are getting old and they're breaking down, and then they're needing to be rebuilt. And what happens is when a protein breaks down in our body, so if I just think about my skin, for example, it's made up of millions of proteins. But all this tissue, like it's literally made up of all these little proteins. And each one of those, when it gets old, and this is in my skin right now, this is happening for sure. There's a protein in there that is not as functional as it used to be. So it's breaking apart. And when it breaks apart, what is observed, if you could see it at a microscopic level, is that it's made up of all these little things called amino acids. So here comes like the hero of our story where we started, right? It's made up of these 20 amino acids. And what happens is some of these amino acids can be reused to remake that skin protein, or they could be shuffled to another part of the body to help rebuild some heart tissue or make a new enzyme, et cetera. On the other hand, some of the amino acids are old and they can't be used. So I'll actually just pee them out via urea. Similar to, honestly, if you were maybe redoing your house, it might be that you're going to redo some of the tile. And it's like, well, actually, this tile is fine. We'll keep it. But this other tile is too old. It needs to be replaced. So what becomes clear when you start to understand this role of protein and amino acids in your body is that all these proteins are breaking down constantly. There's a constant protein turnover throughout the body and all these different parts of the body. And when that happens, some amino acids are excreted and you lose some. There's like a net loss of amino acids. So the question is, well, how do you get more amino acids in your body to help rebuild all these proteins, to help rebuild your heart tissue and muscle and hair and skin and nails? That is why we eat protein. When we eat dietary protein, the proteins that come from plants, from animals, et cetera, when we eat those, we digest them via our digestive tract. We break apart the proteins into the little amino acids. They go into our blood and they become available for our whole body to rebuild all the proteins in our body. So that's what an amino acid is. And that's what a protein is.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for the biology lesson, because that's a great way to explain it. The analogy of the house and breaking it down. I think some things we can completely understand. Now, what happens, my question is then, when you don't get enough, or if you're a vegan, for example, can you get enough essential amino acids with just plants? And is that very difficult?
So I heard you say two questions. One is, what happens when you don't get enough protein or you don't get enough amino acids? And are vegan-based diets sufficient to get enough of these aminos, right, from your diet?
Yes.
So I'll answer the vegan question first. Yes, you can get enough amino acids and essential amino acids, which I'll get more into, from a vegan diet. It requires more work. It requires a lot more work than if you eat animal-based proteins. I'll unpack that in a second about like why that is the case. But I'll also quickly answer, well, what happens if you don't get enough, right? Like what happens if you don't get enough protein or amino acids? So the interesting thing about protein and amino acids is that it's not the same as, but it's an interesting kind of parallel to the way that fat works in our body. So if we eat too much carbohydrates and fat, like you eat just too many potatoes or you eat too much olive oil and whatever these things are, more than what you can burn in a day. What our body does, and in a very intelligent way, is it stores it, it keeps it. And that is what additional body fat is. If you put on 10 pounds of body fat, it's because you consume more calories than you needed. And and this will change over time, and hormones can impact this. And it's not always the same if you're 5 or 10 or 15 or 40 or 60. But fundamentally, you consume more calories than your body needed to burn in that day. And so what your body does is, well, I'm going to keep this. I'm going to store this in case at a later date, I'm really hungry and there aren't enough calories. And you can think, when we used to like forage for our food, it wasn't always the case that you could find food. So if you found a lot on one day, great. Our bodies had a mechanism to store it. So muscle's not the same, but muscle is similar in that we must also not just get energy from our food, we must get these amino acids from our food. We must get protein and the amino acids in them from food. And if we go for an extended period without amino acids in our diet, what happens is we can't just stop rebuilding our heart tissue. We can't stop building hormones and enzymes. You can't, like, you have to rebuild the house that is our body. So where do you get the amino acids from to do this if you're not getting it from your diet? And there's only one place, and that's your muscle. So when you go for an extended period, and it technically happens after just a few hours of not having sufficient dietary protein and amino acids. Now, you don't need to start freaking out and be like, oh, if I don't eat, protein every few hours, I'm going to melt away. But that is the case. If you really do not eat protein or amino acids enough for a significant amount of time, what happens is you break down that muscle tissue into the amino acids that make it up, and it gets supplied to the rest of your body. So the number one thing that's going to happen if you do not consume enough protein amino acids is your muscle will waste away. And this is very much the case. It happens with people as they age. But there's also other things that happen when you don't eat enough protein and amino acids. You basically stress the body and all of these other ways in which it needs protein and amino acids. I give this example of like breaking down the muscle to supply the heart tissue. But here is a kind of more, I think, mind blowing, and I don't mean to hit the pun too hard in the head with this one, but like our minds are run by things called neurotransmitters, and they're chemicals in our brain through which we experience emotions. These chemicals are actually amino acids or the metabolites of amino acids. So even our whole mind and our whole brain and all of our emotions are run through this kind of amino acid structure. And having a sufficient amount of protein and amino acids on a daily basis, combined with other things too, like exercise, it's not the only thing, but it's a very important thing, is one of the most fundamental and foundational things you want to look at when you're trying to regulate your mood. So that's going to be an issue. Similarly, if you really stress the body and you go below your daily intake needs, you can have hair loss, significant skin issues, you can have all kinds of metabolic issues. So really, you can have immune system issues. The whole body is needing these amino acids to run itself. So the issues just kind of start to cascade if you do not get enough protein and amino acids on a daily basis.
And I agree. And that's from what I understand is, yeah, definitely you can. It's just going to be a little harder. And have you ever seen that mouse study? Had, or maybe they were rats, I don't remember. And they had fed them one normal diet with protein and the other one's completely protein deprived. And then they showed the one rat looking all healthy and fluffy and had great hair and had a lot of energy, and the other one was just completely aged, no hair, and it was lost a lot of muscle and it looked a little frail. And it was quite an impressive image to see these two mice or two rats at the same time. So I don't know, have you seen that one, or is that just me like
I'm not sure exactly which study you're referring to, but studies on humans and animals, specifically on protein intake, is one of, I mean, there are thousands of studies. So this isn't like what we're talking about right now is not like, oh, this is new, like cutting edge
it was
science.
like a long time ago. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised is basically what I would say, that there is a study that shows exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. It to me, it seemed like it was one of those things that went viral. It was even before I even interested in nutrition. So I love that study. I'm wondering then, okay, as you mentioned, as we get older too, we have a bit of a problem getting our enough protein in, but also what about the fact that as we age, we don't seem to be absorbing our proteins as well either with our gut, our changes in the gut microbiome. And we can be, or other people who actually do have gut issues, whether they're older or younger, they don't seem to absorb proteins as well. And so then they have to take some enzymes or they have to clean their gut. And that also is a big issue. So we need to help those people out too.
Yeah, what I might do here is actually bridge the vegan question with this aging question because they're related in a way. And there's an underlying, I think, further understanding for everyone about how the protein actually works. Like, how is it that we build this new muscle, and how is it that we have new protein synthesis from it? So a lot of this is actually based on the quality of the protein that we eat. And in young, healthy adults, the type of protein that we eat will have very different impacts on us. And here's basically what you would want to look for in a protein source and why it would matter. Number one is how digestible is that protein? Meaning, when you chew it up and it goes through your digestive system, can the enzymes that are naturally in our body, do they enable us to break apart those proteins and make the amino acids available to our blood? And so this is not a question of like, do I have an allergy to a certain plant or to dairy or something like that? It's like literally all of us as a species, how are we able to digest this protein? And the kind of simple fact is that dairy is basically has the highest digestibility score in terms of making the amino acids available. Now, if you have an allergy to dairy, maybe it's not relevant, but it's the highest. And then comes meat sources and eggs. And then after that comes certain types of plants like soy, buckwheat, quinoa. I know you're interested in spirulina. Spirulina is one that's quite digestible, but all of these are after basically the animal proteins. So, I mean, really, that's the first thing you need to know is like, how digestible is it? Can I actually get the amino acids out of it? Then,
It's surprising. I'm sorry to interrupt you because you think that a lot of people would say, well, no, it takes hours to digest a piece of steak, for example. Is that something completely different than what you're talking about? Because then you would think, oh, well, then a plant or even the dairy, I can understand how that breaks down quickly. Is that not surprising that the animals are a little bit more, takes a longer, I mean, a shorter time to digest, or did I not understand you?
well, it's not exactly a shorter time. Like the time duration is actually a different issue because even certain types of proteins. Yeah, I think what you're speaking to is like people's sense of when I eat this food, how long it takes me to feel like I digested it. But
Yes.
even in dairy, there is whey protein and there's casein protein. And the whey protein digests much more quickly, like much more quickly than the casein protein.
Mm.
Still, both of them are highly digestible. When you actually eat that protein, whether it's the whey or the casein, even though they take much different amounts of time, I can get a lot of the amino acids out of the protein. So it's
Mm.
not the time thing is not so relevant.
It's
It, it,
pulling,
it,
yeah. You're saying it's pulling out as the amino acids out of the actual plant or meat, and
yes,
not the necessarily the time that we're digesting it.
yes.
Got it. Got it.
But we'll get to time because time is actually very important. We'll get to time in a second. But the first thing is like how digestible is it? Then the next question is going to be, well, when I eat this protein, assuming it's digestible, how much of that protein is made up of essential amino acids? And one way of describing this is maybe thinking about like stone materials that you might put into your house. Like you could buy higher or lower quality stones or higher or lower quality wood. Like, are you getting a pure hardwood or are you getting a plywood? Are you getting a brick that's made out of like very high quality minerals or is it kind of made up of lesser quality minerals? And both are bricks, right? And both could be stacked, but they're not actually made of the same stuff. And so when you look at a protein, there are essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. There's another thing called conditionally essential, but I think it's a little too nerdy for what we're getting into right now. So essential amino acids are defined in two ways. One is your body can't make them. That's where they get their name essential. Like they are essential to eat or you will die. Like that's literally where it comes from. And there's 9 of them. So the main idea in that is, well, obviously you want to eat proteins that are higher in them because they're the ones your body can't make. But if you eat those 9, then your body can make the non-essential ones. The other thing though is that the essential amino acids are the active component of the protein. So they're not just the bricks. They're not just, or not the little fine grains that make up the bricks. In a kind of a bizarre way, they're the workers that actually come and lay the bricks. They have this active kind of chemical component to them that makes the protein synthesis occur. So when you consume something that has a lot of digestible essential amino acids in it, it stimulates more new protein synthesis than one that does not have it. And if you don't have essential amino acids, you get 0 stimulation of protein synthesis. So non-essential amino acids contribute absolutely 0 degree, and they've done many studies on this, to actually stimulating more protein synthesis.
Crazy.
So
Crazy.
1, it needs to be digestible. 2, you want to make sure that it's very high in the essential amino acids. And then a third thing to think about would be, well, how calorically dense is it? Like, are there tons of other calories wrapped around it? And to get this protein, do I have to eat a bunch of carbs? Do I have to eat a bunch of fat? And so immediately what you realize is that plant proteins tend to be wrapped in a lot of carbohydrates. That's not true for necessarily something like spirulina, right? But it's also less true for certain types of things. Like soy is going to be more dense in the protein than some others are going to be. But the same thing's true for meat. If you eat a really fatty cut of meat or you eat bacon, like that, it's not a very efficient source of trying to get these essential amino acids. So that's kind of how you would think about, well, how do I get the right protein, et cetera? So in that whole conversation, you can see, well, this is what I'd say is animal proteins are more digestible, have much higher amounts of the essential amino acids. And if you choose them in leaner cuts and not super fatty versions of it, they're much more efficient calorically. So if you're willing to include, even in a vegetarian diet, eggs and dairy products, it is much more efficient than a vegan diet in terms of being able to get the amount of protein and essential amino acids that you need and want. That doesn't mean you can't do it on a vegan diet. It just means you're going to be eating a lot of carbohydrates and the protein is much less digestible. And so you have to be much more disciplined in your diet, I think, or you have to be highly active. Like if you're a long distance runner, it's going to be a lot easier because you can just consume tons of calories because you're burning, I don't know, 5,000 calories a day or something. Now, how does this play out as we age? And why is it different as we age, or what changes? So now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about this kind of how fast does it digest thing, because this is actually very poignant for aging, and this is how we understand why it's so different as we age. So in everything I just described, it had nothing to do with like how you ate the meat, when you ate the meat, etc. But this one I think tends to be kind of mind-blowing for people. Studies have shown basically 30 grams of beef protein, which is considered a very high quality protein in terms of stimulating protein synthesis, will stimulate more protein synthesis than over twice that amount, 70 grams of beef protein, if you eat that beef protein as part of a mixed meal. So eating the beef on its own stimulates more than twice the amount if you eat it as part of a mixed meal with like broccoli, potatoes, etc. And in no way do I want to then like try to persuade people like you need to start breaking apart all your meals and only eat meat on its own, etc. But I'm going to describe the underlying factors that cause that and then offer more detail about then how this changes as we age. So what's going on there is that when you eat the beef, you break down the proteins and the essential amino acids go into your blood. And what has been uncovered in the last 20 years is that the higher the concentration of essential amino acids that hit the blood all at once is directly correlated to the increase in protein synthesis. Your body wanting to rebuild, to get rid of old proteins and build new ones in their place. In a very kind of anecdotal way, intuitive way, it makes sense. So if I eat the beef on its own, it's not getting all mixed up with like the broccoli and the potatoes and the digestive system. And that is basically what happens when you eat the beef on its own. It just simply works better. Now, that's not to say that, again, that you need to always do that, right? I think there's lots of other reasons why we eat whole food meals. You need the micronutrients and the fiber from the broccoli. You need, I think, to like enjoy a nice whole food meal with family or friends or whoever. Like there's lots of other reasons why we would eat. It's not only for protein synthesis. And here's an even further interesting fact. When you start looking at things like protein powder, whey protein powder, gram for gram, raises those EAA levels in the blood about 3 times more than the beef does gram for gram.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
So the whey is way more powerful than the beef, whole beef. And why is that? Well, the whey has been stripped of like other carbohydrates and fat. It's even that much more digestible. It's in this powder form. Like it's very easy for your body to digest it and for the EAAs, the essential amino acids, to enter the bloodstream, right? Mm-hmm. Now get this. When you look at an essential amino acid supplement, specifically formulated, you need to have certain types of formulation. It needs to be higher in leucine, isoleucine, valine. You need a certain dose of this. But when you consume that free form one, it raises the EAA levels in the blood 3 times more than the whey protein. So we're talking like almost 9 times the amount of the beef on its own, way more. I think it's like 17.69 times of like beef as part of a mixed meal if you take just a free form essential amino acid supplement. And so, well, why is that? Well, one, the EAA supplement it's entirely essential amino acids. It's entirely the active component. Whereas even a whey protein is only about 45%. The protein in whey is only about 45% EAAs. And the free form EAA amino supplement is like, you just immediately digest it. It just goes into your blood. You don't have to like break down the proteins and get the amino acids out of it.
What if you ate it with the meal though? Sorry, if you took the essential amino acids with a mixed meal,
it will make the meal work better. It will actually kickstart a process of muscle protein synthesis, and it'll mean you'll get more out of that beef that you're eating on your own, that you were eating on its own before, which is, I think, oftentimes too a kind of newer idea for people. And it's like, oh, I thought I would just take the aminos on their own. They'll actually help you get more out of your meal. Now, what I'd say is I think that's less relevant for a 20-year-old. It's much more relevant for a 50-year-old. And so can we really get to aging and like how different it is? So in those 20 somethings, basically the EAAs have like 3 times the impact of the whey. Well, when they looked at 60-year-old women, 3 grams of a leucine enriched EAA supplement had the impact of 20 grams of whey. So over 6 times the impact. So literally from 20 to 60, the impact is doubled from the EAA supplement over the whey. So like what it is, like the EAA supplement somehow got more powerful. Like, no, it didn't get more powerful. Something happened where the whey became less powerful. Why did it become less powerful? What happened? And I would say the beef protein is going to even lose more of its potency and power for those older adults. So what's going on? So here's what's happening. As we age, it starts at about age 30 and it progresses more 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 and beyond. Our ability to digest the protein, to whatever the protein source is, to actually break it down, we have less enzymatic function to break apart those proteins and get the amino acids out of them. But furthermore, we actually also have less sensitivity to those EAAs when they get into the blood, stimulating the new protein synthesis. And again, it makes intuitive sense. Like when you're 20, the focus of your body is to like build it, be strong, robust. It's like to go out and work, to reproduce, to be in that phase of life. And as we're aging, there's less kind of natural physical demands from the environment upon us. Now, as civilization has developed more and more and we can live to 70, 80, 90, maybe beyond, like suddenly we're in this position where it's like, well, I don't want that to happen though. I don't want my body to suddenly deprioritize the use of protein. I want it to like anything you can get from the protein or from amino acids. I want it to use that to like help me build more lean muscle, help me keep off fat, help me live longer, be stronger, improve my immune system, do all these things. And so really, if you want to try to overcome that and overcome those challenges, that's one of the places where protein powder over a whole food, like another whole food snack, is an interesting solution. But an essential amino acid supplement is that much more, I would just say, surprisingly beneficial. Like if you're over 40, the benefit you're going to get from not replacing a meal, but adding in essential amino acids first thing in the morning or midday or before bed or before or after exercise, you're going to get so much more benefit, 6 times more benefit than you would get from a whey protein shake at a much smaller serving. So it's pretty provocative, actually, how different these supplements can work for us as we age versus when we were 20.
It's really mind blowing. And I think a lot of people already know, at least who are listening now, they're kind of up to speed. And yeah, we have trouble digesting some of our proteins. And then interesting, the whey as well. I'm guessing an essential amino acid supplement doesn't need to get broken down, right? So that's why you absorb it quite easily into the bloodstream and it's not an issue as you age. Is that correct?
Yeah, the primary thing is that you don't have to digest it. I would say that's the primary. But the secondary, also very important. And this comes down to more of a formulation question, and it will distinguish whether an essential amino acid supplement would actually be beneficial for you or not, is what is in the formula. So this actually only works too if you increase the amounts of the leucine and the isoleucine and the valine and the lysine, those 4 particularly. There's other amounts of the other ones, and this is not like me in some proprietary secret study. This is like NASA and the NIH and the Texas medical branch of the University of Texas university system. You can Google any of this stuff and find it as publicly available studies. What happens is through these amino acid supplements, if you're able to increase the amounts of those specific ones, you can get way more benefit from the supplement on top of them being more bioavailable than a whey protein. So it's like you can design the amino acids to be more ideal for an aging adult.
I was going to go down the road, like, where do we get our essential amino acids from? Which foods? And you mentioned the best was the dairy, and then of course the animal protein. So I didn't even go there because now I'm already convinced I've just stick with my essential amino acid supplement as I'm aging. I mean, I'm still going to eat the food. Of course, like you said, we obviously need it for so many other nutrients and functions and things that our bodies want. It's just that we can't be kidding ourselves anymore of breaking down all the essential amino acids that we actually need. But I'm wondering, because we had this little chat before, and I'm a fan of spirulina, and I did this great episode about that was explained how great this essential amino acid profile is in a spirulina, and it's already broken down and it goes straight into the bloodstream and all that. So how does an essential amino acid supplement compare to just taking a bunch of spirulina?
I would actually say the spirulina is a close equivalent to whey, in that spirulina is about 70% protein, whereas a whey protein isolate is going to be about 80 to 90%. So the whey is a little bit better in terms of its total protein content per dry weight, but it's close. And on top of that, the spirulina, I think, is around 45% of the protein, right? So I know I'm saying a lot of percentages. The question is kind of like, you have this mass of protein, you have this mass of whey that you're taking as a powder. Well, how much of it is actually protein? Similarly, you have this mass of spirulina. How much of it is actually protein? 80% of the whey is protein. About 70% of the spirulina is protein. Then when you look at that protein, how much, and this kind of going back to the brick analogy, how much of the protein in those are actually essential amino acids? They're pretty similar. They're both about 45%. So they're pretty close, gram for gram, if you're taking these. The whey is going to be a little bit better. That said, the spirulina is very dense in other nutrients. I mean, it's a superfood for a reason. It's so dense in all these other vitamins and minerals, et cetera. So it's going to provide these other benefits. But gram for gram, it's going to be pretty similar to the whey protein. In light of that, if you compare that then to, say, the essential amino acids, well, there hasn't been a direct comparison study of, like, say, spirulina to essential amino acids. You would assume, based off the digestibility of those amino acids in the spirulina, it's going to be similar. Like the amino acids, EAAs, a leucine enriched EAA supplement is going to be about 3 times the impact of spirulina gram for gram in a young adult, and likely 6 times the impact in a 60-year-old. And the way I like to think about it too is kind of whatever decade you are in between then, well, we don't have a study for every single decade. It'd be about, like, if you're 40, it's about 4 times the impact, 50, about 5 times the impact, 60, about 6 times the impact. Because we progressively, and not every person's the same, but we progressively lose our ability to digest the proteins, and we progressively become less sensitive to stimulation of the protein synthesis.
It sounds like essential amino acid supplement is just 100% essential amino acids, and that's just going to get directly into the bloodstream, and you're going to start using it for protein synthesis. And I get this argument all the time with people who say, well, essential amino acids is just a luxury product and they can be expensive, and I can get everything I need from animal protein or from my whey protein powder. And you answered that question already. So we're going to pass on that one, right?
I mean, I would just say it depends, though, too, kind of like, again, on your situation and your age. I think that, again, luxury is such a funny word, too, because I think of luxury in terms of not like core health issues. I think of luxury like a Toyota or a Lexus. Like a Lexus is the luxury version of a Toyota, but they're both good cars. They both kind of work, but I'm making a choice about, like, how much more comfortable is it, et cetera. When we're talking about food and nutrition and supplements, I think what we're really asking is, how well does this thing actually perform relative to the other? And so, yeah, the answer is whatever the subjective perspective around luxury is, it's about 3 times the impact of whey in a young adult, and it's 6 times for an aging adult. So you just look at that on, if you say, like, the expense question, gram for gram, in many cases, I can say, like, for like my brand, and I can't compare to like every single different brand and every company. We are a more premium brand, and our aminos are more affordable per serving than the whey protein isolate is. And the aminos per serving, then, if you're an aging adult, like, it's a better deal. It's more affordable per serving and for the increase in muscle protein synthesis than the whey protein isolate. So that's not true. It doesn't make sense. That said, I have an 11-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter that are both athletes. And obviously I'm kind of like a health nut. And so, like, constantly trying to get them to eat vegetables and fruits and protein and all of these things. And am I, like, thinking like, oh, like, I have to make sure they absolutely take their aminos every single day instead of their protein powder? No, I'm like, whatever works. So it's kind of like, if I can, after basketball practice, get them to consume a milkshake that's got protein powder in it, win. That's awesome. If they're like, I don't really want that, but I know they just ran really hard and, like, they really need protein and they don't want to eat anything, I have them take aminos because it's easier to take. They just take a few capsules, or they drink this fruit beverage. Like, it feels easier. Whereas on the other hand, with my parents, I don't care how much protein they eat each day. I'm trying to get them to take as many servings of aminos I can get them to take every day, because they're in their 70s.
This reminds me of what just happened to me. And I explained to you off camera before that I just had total hip replacement and it was a big surgery. And I I didn't expect, I mean, I've never had this big surgery like that before. And when I prepared for myself going in, and I increased my protein intake and everything. And I actually had just gotten the Kion essential amino acids in my hands just before. So I was like, all right, I'm going to start taking this. I brought it with me to the hospital and I was chugging it because you don't feel like eating after big surgery. I don't think I'm unique in this space, but I knew my muscles were just ripped open and I needed to rebuild and my bones need to rebuild around this implant. Like there's so much trauma that happened and I knew how important it was. I was just the last thing I wanted to do was eat. So I was so grateful I brought these essential amino acids with me because I just learned all about this and I was super excited and I haven't stopped. I mean, it's been such a help for me. So if anybody's going through a surgery, I mean, like you said, your kids, sometimes it's just more convenient or your parents. Let's not forget about people who just don't feel like eating. And I almost want to think about the Ozempic crowd or the people on the weight loss peptides. And I keep drumming it into them. If you're going to do this, my gosh, you've got to prioritize protein and get to the gym and lift your weights. But it's so easy for them to let go of the food and not get enough protein. The most people that I'm hearing who's getting on these weight loss peptides, they just lose the muscle real quick because they're not eating their calories, they're not eating their protein. So the muscle is the first thing to go. And it's really, really sad. So there's so many uses that we can have for having an essential amino acid powder. I don't think it's a luxury whatsoever. And that's why I have this argument all the time, because I just want to be more efficient with my well, if my goal is to rebuild, repair, and build muscle and have great function to the body, let's talk about your hair growing better, your skin looking better. Well, then let's just optimize it and get it over with and do it in a good way. And to be honest, I've been taking essential amino acids for a long time. I don't really like them. To be honest, it's really hard to get a good tasting one. And I have to say that Kion is the first one that I absolutely love. And I find myself actually drinking more, just drinking more water because I don't have trouble drinking water, but I know a lot of people do. But I'm drinking even more because I really look forward to it. And that mango, whoa, that mango one is so good. I just told you, I'm going to rename it Mango Sticky Rice because it is so good. So bravo to you for not making it taste, not only not tasting bad, but tasting really good. I don't know if there's a secret to that or is that a trade secret? How did you get it? Because like you mentioned earlier, essential amino acids can be bitter and bad tasting.
Yeah. And as I was sharing with you before we started recording, amino acids are actually responsible for these flavor profiles of umami, sour, and bitter that we experience in food. So you're basically drinking a concentrated form of those things. So it's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard to try to flavor it. And I mean, really, and especially if you're trying to flavor it with natural materials, it just takes, and really the simple answer is like a lot of time and work and iteration and like years. The flavors that we have today are not the flavors we always had. It just
Oh.
it just takes time. It really takes a lot of time working at it. It's like many things, it is investing in higher quality ingredients. Like there's cheaper ways of doing things that don't work as well.
Mm, yeah. No, well done. And it dissolves really quickly too. I don't know. I can drink it. Is it actually, that's a great question. How much am I limited to drinking? Because it's really easy. And especially when I was in the surgery, I took two, sometimes three, mostly two scoops a day. And then by the time I got to the third, I was like, I don't know if I should be pushing it. Is there too
Uh,
much?
well, so actually, I was going to share this information earlier when you were talking about the surgery thing. So I think it's a great time to share it. There was a NASA study that was conducted basically in the mid 2000s because they were specifically trying to figure out how to help astronauts not lose muscle. You think about it, you're in space, there's no resistance, there's no lifting weights. So it's a
Yes.
major issue, right? So they actually conducted this study where they had people at complete bed rest for 28 days. They would literally only get up to just slide out of the bed to use the bathroom, but otherwise they had next to the bed. So they were literally in their bed for 28 days. And they had them eat 3 times a day. And then they gave them I think it was 3 servings of the essential amino acids like twice a day. And there was no net muscle loss after the 28 days. So that just shows you how much this type of supplement can overcome the anabolic resistance, can still promote protein synthesis, even in a completely bedridden person, which just gives you that much more kind of like emphasis on why. I can't say this is true for every surgery, right? You need to talk to your doctor. You need to have, it's a medical condition. You need to understand like really what your context is. But if you're in a situation where you're going to be undergoing the stress of a surgery, that's going to immediately interfere your ability to build and maintain new proteins, and you're going to have damaged tissue, where you're going to have an increased need for rebuilding those, and you're going to be at bed rest. Focus on protein nutrition and focus on essential amino acid nutrition should be so high on your list in terms of reducing your recovery time and overall just improving your experience. And again, as you can see in that situation, complete bed rest, no muscle loss. So those doses were pretty high, but actually since then it's been shown, and the International Society of Sports Nutrition, which is basically a purely academic body of all the leading researchers that study all of these types of subjects, and they critique each other's research. They do position papers. They had a position paper that came out last year, and it concluded that up to 100 grams of supplementary essential amino acids are safe per day. So that would be like 20 scoops of Kion aminos. That's like a lot. So I would just say like 3 a day, you're nowhere near the upper limit.
Okay. But tell us a little bit about the different essential amino acids that are on the market. I understand they're not all the same, that it's actually not, it's not the question of having all 9 essential amino acids, but it's perhaps their ratios that are important, or is
both are important. Here's some maybe just guidance I'd offer to the audience and to you if you're trying to find this. The conversation excites you. You're like, okay, well, like, how do I find the right one? And assuming that like for whatever reason my brand does not fit whatever your needs are, this is what you want to look for. Number 1, does it have all 9 essential amino acids? So there's other products out there like just the branch chain amino acids where you only get 3, or there's some formulas like MAP that only give you 8, or other formulas for whatever reason they don't give you all 9. There is no good reason to buy a product that doesn't have all 9.
Okay, so again, BCAAs are out of the table. We're not going to talk about branched chain amino acids.
So branched chain amino acids, BCAAs, which you'll see if you kind of start looking for this type of product, are only 3 of the 9 essential amino acids. They are important, and they are ones that you need more of in your formula. But without the other 6, it does not work. It does not stimulate new protein synthesis. And again, this is, you can Google BCAA myth or reality. It's a great summation of all the research from 2017. So this is again not like new information. They don't work. They do not work for stimulating new protein synthesis. But again, a lot of these things, like maybe there was a study. This is kind of the trouble with the supplement industry. Like maybe there was a study that happened in the 90s, or with BCAAs, there was actually a series of studies that happened over time. And the scientific community did think they worked on their own. But then upon further research, we realized, no, they actually don't. Like maybe if you add them to certain protein sources or in these certain exercise contexts, but like across the board, they simply do not stimulate protein synthesis in the way that essential amino acids do. Similarly, the MAP formula, or anyone that doesn't have all 9, you got a study from the 90s. It says this one thing and people start marketing it and building brands around it. And so they just keep selling their thing, even though it doesn't work, to the degree that a formula with all 9 does. Then the next thing I would say is don't buy a proprietary formula. So there are a lot of brands and products out there, and this is across the supplement industry, where they don't tell you how much is actually in the product. With amino acids, as you said, the actual proportions really matters. So you may find brands out there that just say 5 grams, right? And then it lists the amino acids. You want to know how much leucine, how much isoleucine, how much valine. Those numbers really matter. So if it's proprietary, don't buy it. Then the next question would be, okay, it's got all 9. It's not proprietary. It's telling me how many. So honestly, the simplest thing, and I'm just being honest, is like if you just go to the Kion website or go to the link that your audience will have and look at what's on the label, those are the proportions you're looking for. So you don't necessarily have to understand all the science I'm about to say, but here's the breakdown. The proportions that you want something that starts with the proportions of amino acids as they actually exist in our human muscle. So if you were to do a biopsy of our human muscle, there's a certain amount of tryptophan, there's a certain amount of phenylalanine, there's a certain amount of histidine, all these different amino acids. You start with those proportions, and then you increase the leucine, which is kind of like the leader amino acid for protein synthesis, to make it 40% of the formula. And then you increase the isoleucine and the valine and the lysine to approximate what their percentages and their relationship to the leucine was before, because they basically, the isoleucine and the valine support the leucine, and they're required in similar proportions. And then the lysine is slower to get into the muscle fiber. So if it's not there, it'll basically slow down the protein synthesis overall. And again, like if you look at Kion's label, it's not hidden, it's not proprietary. You can see exactly what it is. If you wanted to, you could try to copy it and mix and match your own thing, but like you want those proportions. And then after that, I would just say you don't need anything else. You don't need caffeine. You don't need non-essential amino acids like arginine or citrulline. You don't need whatever marketing mumbo jumbo, blah, blah. Someone's going to try to tell you like, I invented they have all kinds of new things that like people are trying to sell you all the time. You need those 9 essential amino acids in those approximate proportions. And that is what like the research has shown over and over and over and over again. And then you don't need other weird additives. Like the ingredient label should be pretty simple after that. If it's a flavored powder, there's gonna be the flavor components. If it's a capsule, there's not. And that's really what I would be looking for. And that's the formula, and those are the products that will work according to the discussion that we've had today.
Kion does have capsules though too. Don't
yeah, we have capsules as well. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I used to take capsules. I think, oh, it's easy, because I also hated the flavor. But now I'm converted, because the advantage of at least the flavored ones, I tend to drink more water just because they taste good.
And they work the same. It's like whatever works for you in your life. Like some people they don't mind. They don't have like pill fatigue. They take other supplements. They don't mind taking capsules. And some people, I want to drink a mango beverage. So
yeah,
I think whatever works for you, they work the exact same.
A lot of women in my community, when we are going through this perimenopause transition, we're losing our muscle, we're gaining more fat. So this is a great add-on to a lot of other things we're doing. And I used to, and I do still do recommend women who go and train in a fasted state. I don't really like that, but if they must because they wake up at 5 and they don't feel like eating, I get it. I would probably do the same. I would say just get in your essential amino acids before you get the door. If that's like the last thing you can do. Then there's this whole other debate about, okay, once you finish your training, get your protein in within an hour and all that. So when it comes to essential amino acids, is there a timing we should be taking it before or after, during?
The reason why you would take a protein powder or eat protein before, during, after exercise is the exact same reasons as why you would take essential amino acids. You're taking the protein powder for the essential amino acids. So what I'm about to say is true both for essential amino acids and protein. The essential amino acids are just going to be more impactful than a protein, whether that's before, during, or after. So taking essential amino acids before you train will have the greatest impact. The combination of the stimulation of protein synthesis from taking them on their own, which is honestly a great reason to take them on days when you don't exercise. Like lots of people start to think, oh, the supplements become this thing I kind of pair with my exercise. Like, no, you should take it every day. And you should definitely take it on days when you don't exercise, because that's a day when you're getting less stimulation of protein synthesis. But when you take it before you exercise, you get way more impact from that combination of what gets stimulated from the exercise itself versus if you take it after. That said, taking it after is also good. By taking the essential amino acids after you exercise, there's a multiplication effect of the two together. And in both cases, you're going to reduce recovery time. You're going to improve overall recovery. You're going to optimize and maximize the amount of new protein synthesis. So basically replacing older muscle fibers with newer ones. You're just going to get more if you do it beforehand, and more if you take it like during. Before or during, you're going to get more than if you take it after. The other benefit of taking it before or during is you can reduce muscle fatigue. if you're really exercising for a long time, then what happens is you actually start to oxidize a lot of the amino acids that are in your blood during the exercise itself. And then you start needing to break down the muscle to supply the blood with the amino acids, which provokes more muscle fatigue. So you get an experience of endurance. It can also improve your endurance and for many people, their overall energy and mood during the exercise itself. So I would say if you have to choose, do it before. That said, if you don't like doing it before and you like doing it after is awesome. And if you don't have like budget constraints, both. I would just do both. It's excellent to do both. That would be the most ideal.
Could you mix it with minerals?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can mix it with like electrolytes. Is that the
Yeah,
main idea?
electrolytes.
Like with
Yeah, that's what I
like
meant.
magnesium and potassium or something. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's not going to break down if you mix it with other things.
No,
Does it
they're
matter?
totally complementary. The other thing that's interesting about amino acids is they're hydrating as well. So when you look at how hydration works, it's basically about how well the change to the water or the liquid itself promotes its ability to pass through the small intestine. And so things that increase the hydration ability of a liquid are minerals, things like salts, potassium, etc. It's also glucose, sugar. That is why like Gatorade was made originally with sugar in it. It actually does literally help people hydrate. But the other thing is amino acids. Amino acids have actually been shown to work basically just as well as a sugar does. So by consuming them as part of a beverage, the way that you are, like in your mango drink, it is actually improving the overall hydration of that water than if you had just drunk it on its own.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow. This is amazing. What about, okay, you got flavors that I wouldn't heat up, but if somebody has an essential amino acid they want to put in their coffee or their tea, does it break down? Can you heat up an essential amino acid?
I wouldn't be concerned about heating it up, but I wouldn't. I mean, it just sounds gross. It sounds gross. Like,
well, imagine if it's, yeah, I guess I was gonna say if it's
yeah,
flavorless, but if it's not flavored, you
yeah, I
gotta
don't
have
know. It's
some
like, I don't know,
kind
like you're opening up like capsules of like the unflavored powder. I mean, some people be like, why don't you make it unflavored? I'm like, you should try open up one of the capsules into your mouth. It doesn't taste great. It tastes like umami, sour, bitter all at once. But I don't know, maybe for some reason you like want to add that to like a soup or something. Sure. I mean,
I don't know. It is pretty. I don't throw away a lot of stuff, but I have thrown away unflavored essential amino acids. I thought I was going to be really, healthy by doing that, but you're right. I don't know. Maybe somebody's making a chocolate flavor, or I don't know, heat it
yeah.
up. But okay, well, we won't do that anyways. It's a good thing to have when you're training, if you're in the gym or whatever, and it's easy that you need to hydrate and you want something cold. But I definitely encourage people, always women in my community, to consume protein even when they're not training. And so if it say sometimes, like you said, some people think, oh, well, I'm not training, I don't need to eat as much protein. Well, no, that's when you are actually rebuilding. When you're resting, when you're exercising, you're breaking down, and then we need to rebuild. So if you don't add in the protein and the essential amino acids, it's going to be really hard to build, right?
Yeah. And the essential amino acids, literally on days when you're not training, it's not just for the recovery, they will stimulate a whole new bout of protein synthesis. Like it kind of goes back to the NASA example I gave. These people did not exercise for a month and they didn't lose muscle mass. How is that possible? The amino acids, the supplemental amino acids stimulated this new protein synthesis. They helped to retain and build that muscle. Now, they lost some function and strength, right? They didn't do anything for a month, but literally they didn't lose the muscle tissue. So just to have that in mind, that it's like on days I don't train, it's not just for rebuilding recovery. It's actually to like get similar benefits of what you would get from the exercise. It can't replace the exercise, but ensuring you take it on those days off, it's like you're getting a little bit of similar of what you would get from the exercise.
I'm going to just guess the answer to this, because if you've read any studies on blood flow restriction, they've done a lot of studies of people who had surgeries, injuries, and they got bed rest, and they use blood flow restriction to not lose the muscle. And even if they, I don't know, move their foot a little bit, they're actually increasing the muscle mass. But I imagine if you were to do a blood flow restriction, like if you're bedridden and you have this band on you and you take your essential amino acids, then actually you wouldn't lose muscle, but perhaps even gain it.
And that's a cool idea for clinical settings.
That's what I did. I did it.
Did you do that? Okay. Yeah. That's
I
intriguing. I mean, I'm like, I would do that. I would do that if I had to get surgery. I like that idea.
I put it on the
Yeah.
non operated leg, my bands, and I also was doing the arms as well. I mean, I could do that, but I was taking my essential amino acids. I was doing my blood flow restriction, and my muscle mass is really, really great. I've taken some other supplements as well, but I think I've been really happy with my protocol. But honestly, Kion did come in my life at a perfect time, because if I had to take the nasty essential amino acids, probably wouldn't take them with me to the hospital. I just wouldn't get through. So I appreciate everything that you're saying. I think we've learned so much with you. I've heard you on other podcasts, and I still learned something. So you're just such a great, get so much knowledge with this. So I want to direct people, if they want to try Kion, visit getkion.com. That's GETKION.com/Zora. And you can get Kion for 20% off. I highly recommend the mango one. Like, honestly, that was so good if you had to choose one. But we can also find lots of information about Kion on Instagram, also Kion and their website, getkion.com. I'm really excited to keep trying some more of your products and other flavors. I've gotten through the berry one, and that one is really good too. So far, so good. Two out of two. And you do export to other countries. I asked you that just before, right? It's not just for the US. You can get this in Canada, Europe, Asia. Is that correct?
Yeah, we ship international.
Awesome. And you don't have too much trouble with the customs, which is another great thing. I'm really happy to hear that. And I will be, well, I got mine. You went through me in Spain. So that's also really good. So I just have one last question.
Yeah, go for it.
What is the most important thing a woman going through this menopause transition needs to know about her muscles?
Wow. Well, I'm immediately nervous responding to it as a husband to a wife that's perimenopausal and trying to like act like I'm an authority when it's clearly much more of her and this population's experience. But I think it's hard to say one thing, but here are a few things that I think would stand out. One is, honestly, what's coming up, Zora, is like, be gentle and patient with yourself. Like, rather than like, oh, you got to like hack and focus on this, it's kind of like, at any of these times in our life when we're going through big transitions, how can we really just show up each day for the process and stay open and keep trusting and keep focusing on like what I can kind of do now going forward? So that's what comes up. And I know it's maybe not like the perfect like science explanation, but I think after that, maybe surprising for folks is that sleep, the amount that you sleep, has probably a bigger impact on rates of muscle protein synthesis than some of all these like nuances around protein stuff. So if you are really depriving yourself of sleep, or you're not depriving yourself, but through the hormonal changes, it's hard for you to get to sleep or stay asleep, et cetera, then it's going to play out not just like in your mood and fatigue and things like that the next day. It's actually going to have a pretty big impact on overall muscle protein synthesis. And thus, we didn't get into it, but on your metabolism. So I think really trying to figure out that sleep thing is a big deal. That said, well, how do you get better sleep? Well, through exercise, you get better sleep. Through good nutrition, you get better sleep. It's like all these things kind of play together. And I would just say, I think that the question comes from a really good place, because muscle is really important so often in life. And I think, unfortunately, in a lot of the communication that women get, it's about like how they look or how they experience their self or their body, et cetera. And this is true for men too, but it's like, what does the scale say, or thinness or things like that? And really, for like long-term sustainable health and even just beauty and vibrance, whatever gender you are, but I think especially for women, having tone and having muscle is actually really important. It helps regulate your blood sugar. It helps maintain a healthier metabolism. It helps you maintain activity levels. It helps you feel confident. And I think it is a really valuable and important thing to try to focus on throughout life, but especially during this perimenopausal period, because of the rapid decline in muscle that occurs for so many women. So I don't know. I acted like I didn't have anything to say, and then I said a lot. But I would go back to the beginning. Be patient and gentle, and trust the process.
I love it. I love it. Actually, yeah, we got 2 for 1 or 4 for 1. really good advice. And we could have a whole other podcast on sleep and muscle synthesis. So I appreciate mentioning that as well. So we got to work on all those things and still be kind and patient with ourselves. Thank you so much, Angelo. It's been a real pleasure. And I'm really, really excited to be sharing a product that I really believe in, but also generally essential amino acids. You've educated us so much on that, but it's so much easier to get it in when it tastes good, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you, Zora. You too. Take care.